Pam Bondi just dropped a bomb. Federal Judge James Boasberg is dirty, and she's got the proof to back it up. From secret codes to a full-on judicial cover-up, Bondi's digging up the real dirt behind Boasberg's shady moves. The fallout's huge, and people are split. Some see Bondi as a champ, others think she's a danger. Will she bring the judge down, or will the system have his back? You gotta see this. It's packed with jaw-dropping twists. Chapter 1. The accusation that shattered everything. Pam Bondi stood at the podium, gripping the edges like she was holding back a storm. The room was packed, flashes from cameras lighting up the place like a war zone. Reporters leaned in, scribbling down every word. It was 8 a.m. on a Monday, but today wasn't your average start to the week. Today, she was about to drop a truth bomb that'd flip everything on its head. Judge James Boasberg is dirty, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. And I'm here to show you exactly who he is. The words hit like a sucker punch. The crowd went silent, stunned. Bondi didn't flinch. She knew she was about to step into a full-on battle, and she was ready. This wasn't just some petty political jab. This wasn't a small accusation. This was massive. Real massive. Pam Bondi, the Florida AG, was calling out a federal judge for corruption so deep it could shake the entire justice system. Boasberg wasn't just any judge. He was tied up with some serious political big shots. And now Bondi was coming for him. And this wasn't just about a bad ruling or a single screw-up. No, this was a whole damn pattern, an elaborate cover-up that stretched far beyond what anyone expected. I'm not here to play nice, Bondi continued, locking eyes with the reporters. Boasberg's actions have put lives on the line, and I'm not about to let him walk away. It's time for him to face the music. The room buzzed with tension. What she'd just said could bury careers, whole political empires. She knew the backlash would come fast and furious, but she wasn't worried. She had the truth on her side, and that was all she needed. But what had Boasberg really done? Why was this so personal for Bondi? It all came back to one case. A case so twisted, so full of danger, it'd make your head spin. Boasberg had blocked the deportation of several people linked to a gang so dangerous, it made your average criminal look like a joke. These weren't just street thugs. They were cartel-level bad news, wreaking havoc across multiple states. And Boasberg, he put a restraining order on them, keeping them from being sent back to their home countries. Bondi was furious. Why? Why the hell would a federal judge make such a call? Why stand in the way of justice, especially when lives were on the line? The only answer that made sense to her was that Boasberg had something much bigger going on. A game with political strings, where the rich and powerful made their own damn rules. What Boasberg did wasn't just a screw-up. Bondi's voice grew louder, more heated. It was sabotage. Judicial sabotage. The room went dead silent. Sabotage. Bondi wasn't holding back. And she knew that what was coming next was going to be a storm like no one had seen before. She glanced back at her team, sitting in the back, stone-faced. They had everything they needed. Whistleblower testimony, insider interviews, and, maybe the most damning, encrypted text from Boasberg's own phone, pointing to something much darker than anyone knew. But Bondi wasn't showing her hand just yet. No, she was going to let the world see the whole mess unfold, piece by piece. When the press conference wrapped up, reporters rushed her, hitting her with question after question. Some downplayed it, calling it a political hit job. Others were practically salivating for more dirt. Bondi moved through the chaos like a pro, calm, focused, knowing she had just made history. One reporter, sounding almost disbelieving, threw a question her way. You're really going after a sitting federal judge, Pam? That's huge. You don't think this could backfire? Bondi turned, locking eyes with him. If the system's broken, it's time to fix it. No one gets to break the law. Not even Boasberg. It landed harder than any punch. As she walked off the stage, her mind was racing. She had just started a war, and there was no backing out. But she also knew she couldn't stop now. The truth had to come out, no matter what it cost her. And Boasberg, he wasn't getting off the hook. Back in her office, Bondi sat at her desk. Her team was already diving into the evidence, building the case that would blow this thing wide open. But something else was gnawing at her. Something darker. Boasberg's move to block those deportations wasn't the whole story. There were bigger players involved, and Bondi was determined to uncover just who they were. She reached for the thick file marked Boasberg. Inside were pages of complaints, bizarre rulings, and connections to people who'd been rumored to be part of shady deals. Bondi could feel the weight of what she was about to uncover. This wasn't just a bad judge. This was a system that needed to be torn down and rebuilt. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an anonymous source. The words sent a chill down her spine. Boasberg is just the tip of the iceberg. This goes all the way to the top. The real question wasn't whether Boasberg would fall. It was who else would be dragged down with him. Chapter 2. The Deep Dive. Uncovering the Hidden Truth. Pam Bondi sat at her desk, eyes locked on the stack of papers in front of her. The press conference was behind her, but now the real war began. The accusation against Judge James Boasberg had shaken the political world, but proving it? That was another beast. One wrong move, and everything she'd worked for would crumble. The pressure was suffocating. "All right, let's do this," she muttered, slamming her fist on the desk, shaking off the nerves. She had a team of investigators grinding around the clock, pulling together every scrap of dirt they could find on Boasberg. But it wasn't just about evidence. It was about building a case so solid, so undeniable, that no one could sweep it under the rug. Her phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from a key informant, someone who had worked closely with Boasberg. The message read, "You're close, Pam. I've got something huge, but we need to meet in person." No hesitation. Pam grabbed her coat, her heart pounding with anticipation. This was the break she needed. The meeting was set in a quiet cafe on the edge of town, dimly lit and tucked away from the prying eyes. Pam arrived early, scanning the room. Her eyes locked on a man sitting in the corner, checking over his shoulder like he was being followed. It was him. She walked over, took a seat, and waited. The man, a former clerk under Boasberg, leaned in after a tense look around. "You're walking a dangerous line," he whispered, his voice low, almost drowned out by the clinking of coffee cups. Boasberg isn't just a judge. He's in deep with some major players, politicians, lobbyists, international connections. If you think this'll be an easy ride, you're dead wrong. Pam didn't flinch. "I'm not here to play it safe. I'm here to take him down. What do you have?" The man hesitated for a moment before sliding a thick folder across the table. "This is it. Messages, phone records, testimonies." Boasberg didn't just block that deportation. He's been covering up political corruption for years. He's been working with people who are untouchable. You can't let this go. Pam opened the folder, her pulse quickening as she scanned the contents. Encrypted messages, names, dates, locations. This was it, the smoking gun. But there was a catch. The names connected to the list were tied to figures far more powerful than Boasberg, people who could bury this investigation before it even got started. "This is bigger than I thought," Pam murmured. "Boasberg's just a pawn in a much larger game." "Exactly," the man replied, fear dripping from his words. "You're dealing with dangerous people. If you go public with this, they'll come for you. And they won't hesitate." Pam's mind raced. This wasn't just about a corrupt judge anymore. This was about uncovering a whole network of people manipulating the system for years. Boasberg was just the tip of the iceberg, and she was about to dive headfirst into those cold, murky waters. "I'm not backing down," Pam said, her voice cold and determined. "I've come this far, and I'm not stopping now." The man looked at her, his eyes wide with fear. "Be careful. These people, they'll destroy you. They've done it before, and they'll do it again." Pam nodded. She understood the risks. But the thought of letting this corrupt system continue unchecked, she couldn't live with that. Back in her office, Pam sat with her team, going over everything. It was clear, Boasberg wasn't flying solo. There were too many connections, too many people involved. The encrypted messages were filled with talks of hiding documents, delaying cases, and manipulating rulings to protect the elite. And this wasn't just one or two cases. This was a pattern that spanned across the board, all aimed at protecting the untouchables. "We've got the goods," Pam said, her voice cold as steel. "But we need to be ready. This isn't just about Boasberg anymore. This is about tearing down a whole corrupt system." Her team nodded, understanding the weight of the battle ahead. They'd already interviewed whistleblowers willing to testify, but they needed more. Concrete evidence that would hold up in court. That meant digging deeper. A lot deeper. Pam's eyes flicked to the encrypted message logs. One name kept popping up, over and over. Signalgate. It was a code name, something Pam had heard whispers about, but never solid proof. Now, she had to know what it really meant. The following days were a blur. Pam's team worked nonstop, chasing leads, cross-referencing everything. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. Signalgate wasn't just an app, it was a tool. A secret method used by Boasberg and his crew to communicate outside the law. They were covering their tracks, hiding the truth. Pam knew they had to act fast. If they didn't, they might lose their shot at exposing everything. But every step forward seemed to lead them into darker, more dangerous waters. This wasn't just about Boasberg. It was about taking down an entire network of corruption that extended far beyond the courtroom. "I don't care how deep this goes," Pam told her team one night, her eyes burning with resolve. "We're exposing it all, no matter what it takes." And so the investigation raged on, more intense, more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The stakes couldn't be higher. The pressure was mounting. But Pam was relentless. She wouldn't stop until the truth came out. Boasberg was just the beginning. The real fight was just getting started. Chapter 3. Signalgate. The secret that could bring Boasberg down. Pam Bondi sat at her desk, staring at the pile of files in front of her. Every page felt like a puzzle piece that she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. The deeper she dug into Judge James Boasberg's shady activities, the more the web seemed to spread. But one name stuck out, a name that sounded like a code. Signalgate. It was a riddle wrapped in a mystery, and Pam could feel that she was only scratching the surface. Sitting there, her fingers hovered over the encrypted messages on her screen. Her team had intercepted some communications, but nothing was making sense. All they had were bizarre conversations, cryptic references, and a mention of an app, Signal. This encrypted messaging app, used by those trying to hide their tracks, was clearly the tool of choice for those in Boasberg's circle. They weren't just trying to avoid the law, they were hiding something much bigger. "Pam, you need to see this," called Lucas, one of her investigators, from across the office. His voice had that edge of excitement mixed with fear that told her he had found something major. Pam grabbed the files and walked over to his desk. He pulled up a decrypted message. Pam's eyes scanned the screen, her heart racing. The first message was dated months before Boasberg's controversial ruling on the deportation case. "Make sure this stays off the record. Boasberg's involved. We need him to delay the deportations. He's our guy." Pam's stomach dropped. This was it, the smoking gun. But one message wasn't enough to take down a federal judge. She needed more. Context. Names. Dates. Anything that would link Boasberg to these shady figures with real proof. Lucas clicked to the next message. It was even more incriminating. Boasberg confirmed. He'll stall the hearing. He said the right people will make sure nothing happens. The right people? Pam muttered, her mind racing. Who were these right people? Was Boasberg taking bribes? Or was this a higher-stakes political game? Pam wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. But this felt like stepping into a hurricane without a shield. Every new message weighed heavier. It was becoming clear that Boasberg wasn't just a judge making mistakes. He was a player in something far bigger, far more dangerous. "What's the next move?" Lucas asked, his voice hushed. Pam paused. She couldn't go public with this. Not yet. She needed to dig deeper, find out who was pulling the strings behind Boasberg. She had a feeling if she followed the signal trail, it would lead her to places no one had dared to go before. "I'll need more access. Find out who Boasberg's been talking to through this app. We need to know who else is involved," Pam ordered, her voice cold and determined. The following days flew by in a blur. Pam's team worked around the clock, tracing every message, cross-referencing names, and tracking the money and connections back to Boasberg. What they uncovered stunned even Pam. One name kept popping up in the encrypted exchanges, a top lobbyist named Mark Kincaid. This guy had his hands in everything from local elections to federal appointments. And according to the messages, Boasberg wasn't just a judge for Kincaid. He was a tool in Kincaid's game. Pam stood over the files, her eyes narrowing as she read through the messages. Kincaid is pushing for a delay on the immigration cases. If Boasberg can hold things up a little longer, we can get a better deal. Don't let him slip up. It was crystal clear now. Boasberg wasn't blocking deportations on his own. He was under the thumb of someone powerful, someone who knew how to play the system for their own gain. This wasn't a minor issue. It was a full-blown scandal. "All right, we've got the pieces. But this is bigger than we thought," Pam said to Lucas, who was watching her intently. "It's not just Boasberg anymore. Kincaid's involved, and his connections go way beyond this city." Lucas's face hardened. This could get ugly, Pam. Kincaid has ties to some seriously powerful people. You're about to take on an entire network of corruption. I didn't sign up for this job to back down. Pam replied, her voice resolute. We're taking this all the way. That night, Pam couldn't sleep. Her mind kept racing back to the messages, to the name Kincaid, to the nagging feeling that something much darker was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to break wide open. She knew bringing down Boasberg and Kincaid would be a fight, but what she didn't know was how far it would go. How many more names would she have to add to the list? The next morning, Pam called a meeting with her closest allies. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. If she was going to take down a judge, a lobbyist, and maybe an entire network of people controlling the legal system, she needed everyone on the same page. You all ready to take this to the next level? She asked, her voice sharp with anticipation. Her team exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. We've got the evidence. We know who's behind this, Lucas said, his voice confident but cautious. It's time to go public. But we need to be careful. These people won't hesitate to fight dirty. Pam's eyes blazed with determination. Then we'll fight back harder. By the end of the week, Pam was ready. She had everything, solid evidence, reliable witnesses, and enough dirt on both Boasberg and Kincaid to bury them. But Pam was about to find out that when you go after the powerful, the rules change. They had their own set of rules, and they weren't afraid to break them. The real question now wasn't whether she could bring Boasberg and Kincaid down. The real question was how far they would go to protect themselves, and how much damage Pam was willing to endure to expose the truth. As Pam stood at the edge of the battle, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't backing down. This was her fight, and she was ready to make them all answer for what they'd done. Chapter 4. Political Storm. The fallout begins. Pam Bondi stood in front of the television, fingers nervously tapping the desk as the news broke. It was everywhere, headlines flashing across the screen, reporters scrambling to twist the story in every direction. She had expected the backlash, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer force of it. Political hit job. Bondi targets federal judge with unsubstantiated claims, one headline screamed. Another report painted it as a desperate ploy from a politician in the middle of a tough election season. Unbelievable, Pam muttered to herself, her frustration mounting. The media had already framed her as the villain. The whispers had started before she even finished her press conference, with accusations that her claims were politically motivated. Critics were everywhere, painting her as someone abusing her office to settle scores. But Pam didn't care. She had known this risk from the beginning. This is just the beginning, she told herself, gritting her teeth, determined to hold her ground. But the pressure was relentless. The media storm was gaining momentum, and Pam could feel the weight of the entire country's eyes on her. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her team. Lucas had some bad news. Pam, we've got a problem. Boasberg's lawyer just filed for a gag order. If the judge signs off, this investigation could be shut down in an instant. Pam cursed under her breath. Boasberg wasn't wasting any time. He was already using his legal connections to fight back. She couldn't let this slide, not now. She needed to go on the offensive. Get me Boasberg's lawyer. Now, Pam barked at her assistant. Not long after, Pam found herself face-to-face with one of the most ruthless defense attorneys in the game, William Carter. Carter was known for playing dirty, winning cases by any means necessary, using his vast network of influence to tip the scales in his favor. If Boasberg's people were getting involved, the stakes had just escalated. She met Carter in a private conference room in a high-rise downtown. He was already seated, leaning back in his chair with that smug, self-assured look she had seen too many times from the system's insiders. He didn't even rise to greet her. He didn't need to. He was already playing his cards. Pam, I've heard the chatter. You're digging into things you shouldn't be. I'd strongly advise you to back off before this gets out of control, Carter said, his voice calm but laced with menace. He leaned forward, his gaze hard. Boasberg has friends in high places. You really want to go to war with him? Pam didn't flinch. She'd been preparing for this. I'm not backing down, Carter. If you think you can intimidate me with your threats, you're wrong. Boasberg is guilty, and I've got the proof. Carter smirked. Proof? Please. What do you have? A couple of encrypted messages? You're playing with fire, and you're about to get burned. I'm not scared of you, or your threats, Pam shot back, her voice as cold as steel. The people deserve the truth. If you're so confident in your guy, let him defend his actions in court. But don't try to silence me, Carter. Because if you do, it won't just be Boasberg who comes under fire. It'll be the entire system. And trust me, people are tired of being lied to. Carter stared at her for a long, tense moment, clearly sizing her up. He wasn't used to losing, and he certainly wasn't used to being spoken to like this. But Pam wasn't afraid. She had nothing to lose. Fine, Carter finally said, his sneer widening. But you won't last. You're out of your depth. We'll see how long you can keep this charade up. Pam didn't waste another second in the meeting. She'd had enough of Carter's games. But there was more bad news waiting for her. Her political opponents were already using the scandal to attack her, discrediting her as a power-hungry politician just trying to make a name for herself. The media had jumped on the bandwagon, and the public was split. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from a trusted source, a whistleblower inside Boasberg's circle. The message was short but chilling. Boasberg isn't the only one with skeletons. Kincaid's got dirt on some very powerful people. He's pulling strings you haven't even begun to uncover. Pam's heart skipped a beat. Kincaid again. This wasn't just about Boasberg anymore. She was beginning to understand how deep the rabbit hole really went. She quickly arranged to meet the whistleblower at a discreet location. Time was running out, and she needed to get every last piece of intel she could before the system closed ranks completely. The meeting took place in a small diner on the outskirts of town. Pam sat in a booth, eyes scanning the room, alert for any signs of danger. It was too quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of a jukebox in the background. She waited, tense, until the door opened. A man in his late 40s walked in, wearing a worn leather jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He slid into the seat across from Pam, giving her a quick, nervous glance. "Do you have the proof?" Pam asked, cutting straight to the point. The man nodded. "Yeah, I've got it. But you need to understand something. This goes way beyond Boasberg and Kincaid. There are people involved in this mess who can make all of this disappear with a snap of their fingers. You're about to step into a war, Pam. A war you can't win alone." Pam leaned forward, eyes locked on his. "Who else is involved?" He slid a folder across the table, thick with documents and photos. "This is the start. I've been tracking Kincaid's dealings for years. He's got connections in Congress, the White House, even the DOJ. Boasberg is just the tip of the iceberg." Pam flipped through the folder, her stomach sinking with every page. This wasn't just corruption. It was a full-scale conspiracy that had been operating in the shadows for years. The system was rigged, and Pam had just uncovered the first real proof of it. She slammed the folder shut, her jaw clenched with rage. "It's worse than I thought." The man gave her a sad look. "I told you, if you push this, you won't just take down Boasberg. You'll take down everyone. But you need to decide if you're ready for that." Pam stood up, her resolve hardening. "I'm ready. Let the storm come." As Pam walked out of the diner, her mind was racing. The fallout from this investigation was just beginning. Boasberg, Kincaid, and the system they had built, none of it would survive the truth. But the question was no longer if they would be taken down. The real question was how far Pam was willing to go to make it happen, and how much of herself she would have to sacrifice to bring the system crashing down. The storm was coming, and Pam wasn't backing down. Chapter 5. Boasberg's Dirty Past. The web of corruption unravels. Pam Bondi sat at her desk, staring down at the mountain of documents scattered before her. What had started as a mission to uncover one judge's wrongdoings had exploded into something much larger. A judge blocking deportations was just the beginning. Now, it seemed like every decision Boasberg had ever made was part of a vast web of corruption. It wasn't just him. This was about a whole system rigged by powerful political elites, shady deals, and decades of questionable rulings. Pam wasn't just hunting down one bad apple anymore. She was going after the rotten tree that had poisoned the entire system. "Where's the rest of the intel?" Pam snapped, pacing back and forth. The connection she had just uncovered felt like the key to unraveling everything. But there were still too many gaps. She needed more. Lucas, one of her best investigators, flipped through a thick file as he stood by her desk. "We've dug into Boasberg's past, Pam. And the deeper we go, the more we're starting to see a pattern. He's been involved in some seriously questionable decisions, especially when it comes to immigration cases. But it's not just that. There are people, powerful people who've been pulling his strings for years. Pam didn't have time for a lecture. Get to the point, Lucas. He slid a set of photos across the desk, photos no one wanted to see. Boasberg, all smiles, shaking hands with well-known political figures. But there was something off about the look in his eyes. These weren't the photos of a judge serving the public trust. They were the photos of someone who had sold out. Here, Lucas said, pointing at one picture. Boasberg with a lobbyist named Mark Kincaid. You remember him, right? He's behind a lot of the shady deals we've been tracking. Kincaid isn't just any lobbyist. He's a kingmaker. If Boasberg is hanging out with him, it's no coincidence. Pam's stomach churned. She had heard Kincaid's name a dozen times, but seeing the pictures made it real. The ties went deeper than she had ever imagined. This was bigger than one judge's bad decisions. The corruption reached to the highest levels. And this? Pam asked, flipping to the next photo. It was a shot of Boasberg meeting with a congressman, shaking hands over a bill that looked like it had Boasberg's stamp of approval. Are we really supposed to believe this is just business as usual? No way, Lucas said, shaking his head. This wasn't just about a bill. Boasberg's been involved in decisions that directly benefited Kincaid and other insiders. We're talking about rulings with huge financial implications. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate. Pam clenched her fists, trying to control the wave of fury swelling in her chest. She'd suspected corruption, but this was no longer just a judge with a bad track record. This was a whole system, a machine, and Boasberg was a key player in it. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deep the rot ran. Later that day, Pam stood in front of a wall cluttered with documents. Her office was a mess, but it was her mess, a war room, chaotic but meticulously organized in a way only she could understand. She had the evidence. She had the names. The connections were starting to make sense. She wasn't just fighting Boasberg anymore. She was fighting an entire network of corruption embedded in the very core of the political system. The game had changed, and Pam knew she was in too deep to back out now. Her phone buzzed with a message from her team. We've got something big. Boasberg's rulings aren't just politically motivated. He's been hiding his financial ties to Kincaid and other insiders right out in the open. He's used his position to steer millions of dollars in contracts to companies linked to Kincaid. And it's all tied to immigration. Pam's heart skipped a beat as the pieces clicked together. The deportation delays. The strategic rulings that always seemed to favor Kincaid's business interests. Boasberg wasn't just a bad judge. He had been getting paid, using his position to enrich himself and those around him. That son of a bitch, Pam muttered under her breath, seething with rage. This is worse than we thought. She grabbed her phone and dialed Lucas. I need everything on Kincaid. All of it. If this goes as deep as I think it does, we can bring them all down. Boasberg, Kincaid, and anyone else involved. But we need to go all in. The next few days passed in a blur. Pam's team worked around the clock, digging through financial records, tracking down anonymous sources, connecting dots. They weren't just uncovering Boasberg's actions. They were exposing the entire system that had allowed people like him to operate with impunity. One evening, Lucas came into her office, holding a thick file. His face was grim. We found something, he said, handing her the file. It's a document from Boasberg's personal bank account. There's a transfer of over $200,000 to a shell company tied to Kincaid's lobbying firm. It's a pay-for-play scheme, Pam. This wasn't about decisions. This was about money. Pam's hands shook as she flipped through the file. The evidence was clear, right in front of her. This wasn't a judge who made mistakes. This was a man who used his position to line his pockets and destroy the integrity of the justice system. I knew it, she said quietly, her voice full of quiet fury. Boasberg wasn't a pawn. He was the kingpin. And Kincaid? He's the puppet master. They've been running this scam for years. Not just them, Lucas added, his voice low. There's more. We've got people from the DOJ, congressmen, even some big corporate names tied to this. If we expose this, we're talking about the biggest political scandal in decades. But Pam, this won't be easy. The blowback is going to be massive. These people will do anything to protect their secrets. Pam leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. This was it. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. If they went public with this, there was no turning back. The system would fight back, hard. But she couldn't stop now. The truth had to come out. I'm not backing down, Pam said, her voice steady and resolute. They've had their time. Now it's our turn. Let's bring the whole damn thing down. As the investigation hit its peak, the pressure mounted. The media was relentless. Political enemies were sharpening their knives, eager to take her down. But Pam didn't care. She wasn't fighting for her career anymore. She was fighting for something far bigger, the truth. Boasberg and Kincaid had made their move. Now it was Pam's turn to make hers. And she wasn't about to let anyone stand in her way. The system might have been rigged, but Pam wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not on her watch. Chapter 6. The Encrypted Truth. Boasberg's fall begins. Pam Bondi leaned back in her chair, staring at the files spread out before her. What had started as an investigation into one judge's questionable ruling had evolved into a deep, twisted conspiracy. What she once thought was just about deportation delays had turned into a full-fledged web of corruption involving political elites, shady deals, and, most shockingly, a network of powerful figures pulling the strings. Boasberg wasn't just one bad judge. He was the tip of a much larger, dangerous iceberg. But now, she was holding the smoking gun, the final piece that could bring everything crashing down. It was an encrypted message, buried in a pile of other communications. Pam's eyes locked onto it, her heart racing. She thought she had seen the worst, but this one message confirmed everything, and more. Kincaid's name, which had haunted her through every step of the investigation, appeared once again. But this time, there was something bigger. Much bigger. Pam, you've got to see this. Lucas's voice broke through her thoughts. His tone was sharp, laced with a mix of excitement and urgency. Pam didn't hesitate. She was already on her feet, rushing over to Lucas's desk. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice calm, but her pulse quickening. Lucas turned the screen toward her, his face serious. "This message, it's from Boasberg himself. But it's clear he's not just working with Kincaid. He's been helping cover up their entire operation. And it's bigger than we thought. It's huge." Pam squinted at the screen, scanning the words. The message jumped off the page. "Make sure the evidence is buried. If it comes out, we all go down. Kincaid will handle the rest." Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. The smoking gun. Boasberg hadn't just been influenced by Kincaid. He had been actively complicit. This wasn't just about political favors. It was a full-scale cover-up to protect their empire at all costs. If this message got out, everything Pam had suspected would be confirmed. And then some. "Boasberg's done," Pam muttered under her breath. "This is it. We've got him." Later that night, Pam sat at her desk, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the discovery. She knew what she had to do. The game had changed. It wasn't just about taking down one judge anymore. It was about exposing a network of corruption embedded in the very foundation of the political system. Boasberg wasn't the only problem. He was part of a broken system that needed to be torn apart. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. Another message from Lucas. "Pam, we've got a problem. The people we're up against are circling. They know we're getting close. They won't just sit back and let this happen." Pam's jaw tightened. She knew the risks, but she wasn't backing down. Too much was at stake. Boasberg, Kincaid, and everyone connected to them were closing in, and she could feel the walls tightening. But Pam wasn't about to back down. She had one goal in mind: bring this whole thing to light. She typed quickly, "I'm not stopping. Get me everything we need to go public tomorrow." The next morning, Pam stood at the podium, heart pounding as cameras flashed around her. The media had followed her every move, but today was different. Today, she was about to drop a bombshell that would change everything. She glanced at the papers in front of her, her entire case laid out. The encrypted messages, the photos, the financial records. It was all there. She had enough evidence to prove that Boasberg wasn't just a judge making bad calls. He was actively working with Kincaid to manipulate the legal system, cover up crimes, and protect their financial interests. She took a deep breath, stepping forward into the spotlight. "I'm here today to tell you the truth," Pam began, her voice unwavering. "For months, I've been investigating the actions of Judge James Boasberg. What began as an inquiry into one case has uncovered something far darker. I have evidence that shows Judge Boasberg wasn't just making rulings to benefit political insiders like Mark Kincaid. He was actively covering up a web of corruption that stretches all the way to the top." The room fell silent. Pam could feel the weight of every reporter's gaze, every camera trained on her. She had their attention. Boasberg wasn't just influenced by Kincaid. He was part of the operation. Today, I'm releasing the encrypted messages that prove it. These messages, directly from Boasberg, show how he was involved in blocking deportations, manipulating cases, and using his judicial power to cover up evidence. This wasn't just about a few bad decisions. It was a full-scale conspiracy designed to protect those at the top of the political food chain. She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. We are talking about a judge who sold his soul to a political lobbyist. And I won't let that slide. The room erupted in questions, but Pam held her ground. She had made her statement. The truth was out. And with that, Boasberg's reign of influence was over. Back at her office, Pam sank into her chair, exhausted but satisfied. The media storm had begun. Reporters were scrambling to cover the story from every angle. Some were calling it the biggest corruption scandal in years, while others hailed Pam as a hero for taking down a corrupt system. But Pam knew better. This battle was far from over. Lucas walked into the office, a grim look on his face. Pam, there's something you need to see. Pam turned to him, her eyes narrowing. What now? It's Boasberg's response, Lucas said, handing her a folder. He's not going down without a fight. He's hired a team of high-powered lawyers, and they're coming after you. They're calling for your resignation, accusing you of political retaliation. They're not just attacking Boasberg anymore. They're going after you. Pam's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let it show. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Let them come, she said, her voice low and resolute. We've got the truth on our side, and I'm not backing down. She turned her gaze out the window, her thoughts racing. This wasn't just about one judge or one corrupt lobbyist anymore. It was about something bigger, the systemic corruption that had been allowed to thrive for far too long. Boasberg and Kincaid were only the beginning. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, and Pam was ready to take it all the way to the top. Chapter 7. The Final Countdown, Boasberg's Last Stand. The walls of Pam Bondi's office seemed to close in around her. It had been days since the press conference, and every minute since had been filled with a frenzy of calls, messages, and nonstop strategizing with her team. The media was already all over the story, some praising her as a hero, others questioning her motives. But none of that mattered. The real battle wasn't in the headlines. It was in the courts, and it was coming for her faster than she could prepare. Pam sat at her desk, flipping through a stack of legal documents in front of her. Boasberg's legal team wasted no time retaliating. They'd filed a motion to have her removed from the case, accusing her of political retaliation. To make matters worse, Boasberg's lawyers had gone public with accusations that she was misusing her office for personal gain. They were pulling out every trick in the book to discredit her and shut the investigation down. Pam slammed her hand on the desk, her frustration mounting. They think they can scare me into backing off? Not a chance. Lucas walked in, his face drawn tight with concern. Pam, we need to talk. Boasberg's lawyers aren't just going after you anymore. They've taken this to the highest levels. The DOJ is getting involved. They're trying to make this look like a political witch hunt. Pam took a deep breath, running her fingers through her hair. I know. They're pulling every trick in the book. But they're forgetting one thing. We have the truth. And the truth is a hell of a lot more powerful than any lawyer's spin or political connections. She stood up, pacing the room, her mind racing. She knew the stakes were high. The pressure was crushing. But what kept her going was the knowledge that the system was broken, and she was the one with the power to expose it. This was her moment. She couldn't let them win. Not now. Not after everything she'd uncovered. Later that afternoon, Pam met with her legal team in a small conference room. The mood was tense, the air thick with anxiety. Everyone was on edge. Boasberg's team wasn't just going after her. They were attacking her credibility, trying to paint her as a partisan hack. The timing couldn't have been worse. With an election on the horizon, any misstep could destroy her career. We've got to be careful with our next move, her lead attorney, Henry, said, rubbing his temples. If we push too hard too fast, they'll turn the public against us. We need to make sure our evidence is airtight. No mistakes. If we go public with any more leaks, they'll pounce. Pam didn't hesitate. We don't have time to play it safe anymore. We have to go big or go home. We're not going to win this with kid gloves on. We've got Boasberg, we've got Kincaid, and we've got enough evidence to bring down half the people in Washington. It's time to take the gloves off. Pam, you're talking about going to war, Henry warned. This isn't just about one judge anymore. It's about an entire network of corruption. And when you take on a network like that, there are no guarantees. Pam met his gaze, her resolve hardening. I didn't get into this to play it safe, Henry. We're going after Boasberg and everyone else who's been part of this, no matter who they are. We're going to make sure the truth gets out, and they can't hide behind their lies anymore. As the days passed, the pressure only increased. Pam's team worked around the clock, gathering every shred of evidence, cross-referencing leads, and preparing for the inevitable court showdown. Every time they thought they had enough, more came to light: hidden bank transfers, new encrypted messages, connections to corporate giants. All of it pointed back to Boasberg and his partners in crime. But each new discovery only made the target on Pam's back grow larger. Then came the bombshell. The phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Lucas. "Pam, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Boasberg's been hiding something huge." A witness came forward, someone who's been working with him for years. "They've got the key piece of evidence that could take him down for good." Pam sat up straight, her heart racing. What's the catch? What's he hiding? A stash of documents, contracts, political favors. It's all buried under layers of corruption. But this witness, he's willing to testify. This could be the nail in the coffin. Pam's mind raced. This was the break they needed. If they could get this witness to testify, it would seal Boasberg's fate once and for all. She could feel the weight of the moment. They were on the edge of history. But one wrong move, and everything they'd worked for could crumble. Get the witness. Get everything. "I don't care how long it takes," Pam said, her voice a steely whisper. "This is the moment we've been waiting for." The next morning, Pam stood before the press again, the tension in the air palpable. The witness had agreed to come forward, and the new evidence was ready to be unveiled. But this time, she wasn't just revealing corruption. She was going to bring down a system that had been corrupt for too long. As of today, we have new evidence in the case against Judge Boasberg and his associates. Pam began, her voice steady. What started as an investigation into one corrupt judge has turned into something much larger. We've uncovered documents that show how Boasberg manipulated cases, accepted bribes, and even sold political favors, all to line his pockets and protect his partners in crime. The room went silent as the reporters scribbled furiously, their eyes wide. Pam knew this would be the moment that could either make or break her career. The public response was already mixed, but this time, she wasn't holding back. This was the truth, plain and simple. "We've got the evidence to prove that Boasberg didn't just break the law," she continued. "He was part of a network that operated above the law. And today, we're holding him accountable." Pam turned toward her team, who were all watching with bated breath. This was it, the moment of truth. They had everything they needed. Now, it was up to the public, the courts, and the politicians to decide if they would let Boasberg and his corrupt allies escape once again. As Pam left the press conference, her heart was pounding in her chest. She knew the storm was far from over. Boasberg's legal team would fight dirty. The media would twist her words. The political backlash would be fierce. But Pam had no intention of backing down. She had started this fight, and she was going to finish it. "Let them come," Pam said under her breath. "We're not backing down. Not now, not ever." The war was just beginning. But for Pam, this was more than just about one man's downfall. It was about justice. And for the first time in years, it felt like the scales were finally tipping in her favor. Chapter 8. The Final Reckoning. Boasberg's Empire Falls. Pam Bondi's phone buzzed incessantly as she sat at her desk, her hands trembling from exhaustion. The days had blurred into a whirlwind of phone calls, legal maneuvers, and media storms. But now, with the final bombshell dropped, everything had come to a head. The last piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place, and Boasberg's fate hung in the balance. Her heart raced as she watched the news unfold on her screen. The media was reporting that Boasberg's lawyer had officially announced that the judge would face charges of obstruction of justice, corruption, and misconduct. This wasn't just a victory. It was the beginning of the end for the judge who had operated with impunity for so long. She sat up straighter in her chair, trying to shake off the feeling of uncertainty that had started creeping in. Boasberg wasn't done fighting. She knew that. His team would be scrambling to discredit her, trying to pull every last string to get out of this. But Pam wasn't about to back down now. The fight wasn't just for Boasberg. It was for every person who had suffered because of a corrupt system that protected the guilty. Her phone buzzed again, And this time, it was a message from Lucas. Pam, they've hit back. Hard. Boasberg's filing for an injunction to block the release of the evidence. They're going after your team next. It's getting ugly. Pam's jaw clenched. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a battle for justice. And they weren't going to let her walk away without a fight. She quickly dialed Lucas. What's the move? Don't back down. Lucas's voice was determined. We have everything we need to take this to court. This isn't just about Boasberg. It's about holding the entire system accountable. If we don't go public with this now, we'll lose the momentum. We need to strike while the iron's hot. Pam paused, taking a deep breath. She'd been in tough spots before, but this was different. This wasn't just about winning a case. This was about breaking the system that had allowed people like Boasberg to operate with impunity for so long. All right, Pam said, her voice cold as steel. Get everything ready for the press conference. We're not waiting for the courts to decide this. We're taking this to the people. The press conference was set for the next morning. Pam stood in front of the podium, the room packed with reporters who had been waiting for this moment. The media had been relentless, speculating, accusing, and debating. Some were on her side, calling her a hero. Others had twisted the facts, painting her as a political pawn. But none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was the truth. I'm here today to give you all the facts, Pam said, her voice steady, unwavering. Judge James Boasberg has been exposed for what he truly is, a corrupt judge who has used his position to manipulate the legal system, obstruct justice, and line his pockets with illegal gains. And today, we are holding him accountable. The room was dead silent. Pam felt the weight of every reporter's eyes on her as she spoke, the tension hanging thick in the air. She knew the storm that was about to follow would be brutal, but she didn't care. The truth was her shield, and she wasn't backing down. For months, we've been investigating Boasberg's role in the corruption that has plagued our legal system. We've uncovered hidden financial transactions, encrypted messages, and documents that reveal the extent of his wrongdoing. He wasn't just making bad rulings. He was taking bribes, covering up evidence, and ensuring that political insiders like Mark Kincaid were protected at all costs. The reporters scrambled to take notes as Pam laid out the evidence. The encrypted messages, the financial transfers, the interviews with whistleblowers. Everything. The room was electric with the shock of it all. Pam could feel the weight of the moment, but she knew she couldn't stop now. Boasberg's actions are not just an isolated incident. They are part of a much larger network of corruption that reaches into the heart of our political system. Today, we are not just taking down one man. We are taking down a system that has allowed the rich and powerful to break the law without consequences. And we're just getting started. Back in her office, Pam collapsed into her chair, exhausted but satisfied. She had done it. She had exposed the truth to the world. But even as the victory started to sink in, she knew the battle was far from over. The media frenzy had reached new heights, and Boasberg's legal team was already making moves to try to discredit her. Her phone rang again, snapping her back to reality. It was Lucas. Pam, you're not going to believe this, Lucas said, his voice low. Boasberg's been arrested. Pam's eyes widened. What? How? They've charged him with obstruction of justice, bribery, and failure to recuse himself from cases involving conflicts of interest. And it's all over the news. The public is outraged. The judge has finally been caught. Pam couldn't believe it. She had known they had the evidence, but to see it unfold in real time, Boasberg's empire crumbling, the man who thought he was untouchable now facing criminal charges, it was a rush like nothing she had ever felt before. But the victory didn't feel as sweet as she thought it would. She knew this was just one battle won in a much larger war. There would be more fallout, more fights, and more people who would try to protect their own. The system that had allowed Boasberg to rise to power wasn't going to disappear overnight. And there would be more people like him, more corrupt judges, more powerful lobbyists, more politicians with blood on their hands. Pam wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Lucas, keep digging. We need to go after Kincaid next. And after that, we take on the whole system. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of court hearings, media appearances, and behind-the-scenes battles. Boasberg's trial had begun, and the evidence was damning. The judge was going down. But the deeper Pam dug, the more she realized how far-reaching the corruption went. Every time she thought they were getting closer to the top, new layers of deception were uncovered. But Pam wasn't afraid. She had exposed Boasberg. She had taken on the political machine that had protected him. And now, she was coming for the rest of them. The final reckoning had begun, and Pam Bondi was leading the charge. As Pam looked out over the city from her office window, she knew this was just the beginning. The fight for justice was far from over. But the victory over Boasberg and the corrupt network he represented felt like a monumental step forward. It wasn't just about one man's fall from grace. It was about making sure the system was held accountable. And Pam was just getting started. The fall of Boasberg, corruption unraveled. Pam Bondi's battle against Judge James Boasberg wasn't just about taking down a single corrupt judge. It revealed a shadowy network of powerful political figures who believed they were beyond reproach. With the truth as her weapon, Pam meticulously tore down an empire built on deceit, manipulation, and greed. Boasberg's arrest was only the beginning. The real question isn't if others will fall, it's when. If you want to witness more battles like this, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and ring the bell so you never miss any of the explosive stories coming your way. The truth is just getting started.